As mentioned in the previous lecture, it would be great if we are able to display the number of items for each of the store. Let's say Albertson has 3 items, so maybe we can put 3, and H-E-B has 2, Fiesta has 4, and then Walmart can have 10 items. So it will be good to know how many items we have for each of the stores. So let's start with a very simple process. How do we display some sort of a constant hard-coded value right over there? Right now we're using an icon which displays all of these things. Maybe we can wrap this icon inside a control that can allow us to add multiple children's. So I'm going to go ahead and say refactor the icon wrap with a widget, which in this case will be the row widget. Now as soon as I save it, it all messes up. And because even though we have the row widget needs to be inside some sort of a control with a fixed size, because right now we don't really know how long or how horizontally spacious the row widget will be. So I'm going to go ahead and refactor it, wrap with the widget, and use a size box widget which can dictate a particular size. So what size do we want? Well, that's completely up to you. I'm just going to use 100, and you can see that we're back to normal. We can also go ahead and add a spacer control over here in the children, which is going to attach a flexible space and push the icons on the right-hand side. Now, the next thing that we want to do is to display some sort of a counter. So I'm going to go ahead and use a text and just going to say 100, just for a hard-coded value. Okay, looks pretty good, but obviously this 100 is hard-coded and we want to get the actual value. So where exactly are we going to get the actual value? What we will have to do is we will have to go to the store view model, and in the store view model, we will have to provide some sort of a property that will allow us to get the count. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get the property, and I'm just going to go ahead and say that this property will be returning integer because the count will be 1, 2, 5 or things like that. And I'm just going to go ahead and say items count. Now we can go ahead and use store dot reference so that we're talking about the particular store dot collection, and we're talking about items dot snapshots. Now if we use snapshot, we're not going to get the correct value because snapshot values are only incremented when the snapshot actually changes. Sometimes we will be on a different page, like adding a new store item. We will add a store item and we want this count to be updated by using the back button. So in those cases, we're going to go ahead and say get, and get is going to give us just the document itself. Now get, if you go ahead and see documents, and if you hover on the documents, you're going to see that this is actually returning you a future. And what we want to do is to return docs, or we can say actually data over here, I guess, data. So data.docs.length. Now you can see that we should be able to get the length. Make sure that we have Firestore and everything. And if you hover on it, you can see that the getter docs is defined for the type query snapshot. So a couple of different problems we have is that first of all, we are returning integer. So we should be returning a future of int. The second thing is that this is a future, this part. So it's not really evaluated at this point. We can do get.then, or you can use async and await. So let's go ahead and use await. Now we can't use await unless the property is async. So let's use async. And in the end, you will see that items count property comes out to be returning the length of number of documents in the items collection. I'm also going to make sure that this property is a little bit more descriptive. Instead of calling it items count, I'm just going to call it items count async because it is an async operation. Now keep in mind that this is returning you a future. So we need something that can use the future to display the items count. If we go back to the store list page, you can see that right now over here for the trailing, we're simply using a size box. It would be nice if there's some way for us to evaluate this. Now you can go over here and get the property name. So we can say store.itemCountAsync. But this is going to return you future of int. So how do we go about in evaluating this? Well, one of the ways will be to use something like a future builder. So let's go ahead and start using a future builder to accommodate and to resolve our future. I'm going to go ahead and probably copy this somewhere, or you can remove it, whatever you want to do, because we want to add the future builder over here. So I'm going to remove the size box for now. And in order to validate the future, in order to evaluate the future, I'm just going to go ahead and say future builder. And this future builder will be integer. And now we can pass in the future, which is going to be store.itemsCountAsync. This is going to return the future. When the future is evaluated, the builder function gets called. It's going to pass in the context and the snapshot. If the snapshot has data, then we can do something about it. This means that it is evaluated, there's a count. So we're going to go ahead and return a brand new control. So we're going to return a brand new control, and that control is called the items count control. Let's go ahead and first check out the name of this control, item count control, right there. Let's go ahead and return this control. Now let's see if it's already added. We can go ahead and call this control. And if you go to the items count control, which is right here, items count widget, you'll see that we have to pass in the count. So right over here, we will pass in the count, which we can access from calling snapshot.data. Let's make sure that this control is being added. So we will import it, make sure it is there. Otherwise, we are just going to not return anything. So I can simply go ahead and return a size box dot shrink. Basically, it means nothing. And that's it. So let's go ahead and refresh it. And now you can see Albertsons is 1. So if we go over there, we should be able to see one item, which is milk. Okay, great. And then we have HEB and all of those things, Fiesta and HEB and all of those things are 0, nothing there. Now what happens if I go ahead and add another item in Albertsons? So let's say that I go and I add bread and I add a price, let's say $12, quantity 2, and I save. It's saved over here. It's saved in the Firestore database. But what happens if I go back? Well, that's not right. It still says 1. Why does it say 1? So it should say 2, right? Because we just added another item to it. So basically what we want to do is when we go to the store items page, which is this one, and when we go back to it, we want to refresh this. All right. So we need to find out the function where we are actually going to the store item, when we are navigating to the store item, which is right there, navigate to store items. But when we go to the store items, using this approach, we're not doing really anything. I mean, we're not really refreshing or doing anything. So let's first go to the store items and see that where we are popping it out, meaning when we save an item or when we go back, what is going on. So we will go back over here. You can see that in the store items, when we say navigator.popped, we pop the context and we pass in the value, which is true. This is a value that is passed back to the control, basically the caller. And the caller is right here, which is navigator.push, but it's completely ignoring the value. So let's go ahead and make sure that we don't ignore the value. I'm going to go ahead and say async over here because this navigator.push is going to give us a value by awaiting for it. So we're going to await for it. we'll get the value, and I'm going to go ahead and put the value into something called refresh store. This is just a variable, nothing much. Okay, but by creating refresh stores, it's not really going to do anything. I mean, we need to somehow call build. Now, one of the ways you can call build is by setting the state. So let's see that if we have a variable, so we are inside the stateful widget, maybe we can create a variable over here which will allow us to reload the data. So I'm going to go ahead and create Boolean. I'll say reload data, and I will assign it to be false. Now, since this is a stateful widget that we are using, we should be able to set the value of reload data. So once we get the value of refresh stores, based on the refresh stores, if the refresh stores is true, so basically if refresh stores is true, we can go ahead and probably set the state. And inside the state, we will simply say reload data equals to true. All right. Now, whenever we set the reload data to true inside the set state, it is going to rebuild the interface. So let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to go to Albertsons, and I'm going to go ahead and add an item. Let's go ahead and add eggs. Price of the egg, let's say $3, quantity 4, save. And I'm going to go back, and now the items are 3. I'm going to go to Fiesta. I'm going to add another item, just going to go ahead and add a fish. Price is, let's say, $8, quantity is 2, save. It's added over here. If I go back, you can see fish right there. So we have started from the beginning, and we added the store. After adding the store, we added the store items. We faced some issues with displaying or adding the store items. We fixed those issues, and we did a lot of other stuff, as you can see. So this is a really, really good tutorial to go about using Flutter to create an app which has nested sub-collections, and we are storing all of that into the Firestore database. We can see over here, if I go back to the stores and go and check out some stores, you can see most of them have now a collection. So here's Fiesta. If we go to the items, we will see the fish. So this is really, really cool, and we learned a lot along the way. So I highly recommend that you download the resources attached with this particular section, which will allow you to build a grocery app. Once again, you do have to follow the steps to integrate Firebase with it. So you have to replace Google Info plist file and Google services.json. You have to use your own file, because if you try to use my files, then it may not work, or it should not work, and you will never be able to see the actual content of the Firestore, because that is allocated for my account and not your account. All right, so this is great. Let's move on to more fun stuff with Flutter and Firebase.